Yes, sir. We always start with prayer and ask Jack to lead the illusions in the prayer.
It's good to see everybody here, and we're gonna hear some really good stuff today. Let's pray. Father, we want to thank you, God, for the wonderful opportunity of being together. And Father, we pray, God, that you would put your hands upon our speaker. Lord, that you would put your hands upon us. Help us understand and digest the material that's coming out. Lord, help us to be that union that you call us to be. And Father, we just put this in your hands. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Jack is the pastor here at this congregation, and we really appreciate them letting us use their building. Yes. Nice. Let's have a pledge. Would you? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Looks like Joe's trying to help out here, but he has an announcement. You want to wait on that announcement a minute?
Nathan, you do that.
Nathan can do that.
I'm not very good at multitasking, sorry.
We are part of Joe is the chairman of the K County Republican Party. I'm his vice chairman, and right now we are running a fundraiser. We're raffling off an AR-15, and it comes with a couple of extra magazines, an optic, ammo, and a year membership out to the Ponca City Rifle and Pistol Club. And we have tickets if you are interested. They are $10 a piece, or if you buy 3 tickets for $25, or if you have $100 you'd like to donate, we can give you 15 tickets. And see one of us and we'll be able to help you out with that. Thank you.
They have some information in the back on that. You can see Nathan or Joe after the meeting if you want to have $100 worth of tickets. Or maybe less, but that's what we recommend. All right, we're getting closer, hopefully. Any other announcements anybody would like to make? Okay. Come on down. We're working with some technical issues. There's a sign-up sheet in the back. Sign up. I know Terry was extremely excited about being able to speak to the organization. And of course, he has a lot to say about the Oklahoma Second Amendment Association. And so he really hopes to promote that type of effort in more and more states. All right.
Sorry,
Still more?
well, the presentation was too large to email. So I created a folder in my Google Drive where I upload it, so he's gonna get on my phone and walk it through uploading it that way.
Okay. Whatever that means. Well, maybe we can go ahead and get
File too big for email.
Right. Can't carry that much. Maybe we can get Mr. Key to go ahead and start speaking while Joe's working on the issue. I'll just go ahead and give a brief introduction. Some of you may have read at least the flyer, but it didn't give a lot of information about him. But Charles Key is the principal of Key Financial Advisors, an independent financial consulting firm specializing in retirement, financial planning, and insurance services. Woo! So that's what he does for a living. He has served 2 separate, not really terms, but I guess periods in the Oklahoma House of Representatives. And while he was there, he was chair of the Insurance Committee. But he served on judicial, financial services, retirement, commerce, industry and labor, education, correction, rules, banking and finance, and he was assistant floor leader and minority whip during those terms that he served. So he has a lot of stuff here that he's done, but especially today, he's going to talk about the bombing that we're all familiar with. Who remembers where they were when that happened?
Those two.
Elementary school? You're not that young, are you?
I graduated a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Well, what did you do with your body?
Just about.
Oh. I remember I was at NOC, I was walking towards my classroom when all of a sudden, all this commotion in the hallway. What? And everybody started talking about it. Because we got to a TV as quickly as possible and just started listening to, and we were all shocked. I don't think I had a class that day. I think we just sat dumbfounded. But it's something I think we're all very interested in and concerned about. What happened, maybe what really happened, something we may not know about. So he's going to tell us about some of these possibilities.
You know, I lived down in Oklahoma City at that time, and actually in Bethany. And when the bomb went off, the business had, well, not like that, but you know those little tiles or something in the ceiling, and they just lifted. And we were like 20 miles at least, maybe I'm sure more away. It was, you know, we were aware of it a long distance from the
Yeah.
side.
That gentleman back here telling me that, I forgot exactly how far away you were.
And it was, they called it, it was Martin Luther King, but it was eastern. I was on the northeast side
Okay.
of Oklahoma City. And I was going to Oklahoma City Community College. And I was in my bed, and I weighed about 200 pounds then, and I was in my king-size bed. And it shook, and my bed moved about that much.
The bed moved about 4 inches.
And I thought it was an earthquake.
Yeah.
You know, and I was sitting there in my bed waiting for the aftershock. And then my friend called, because I was going to this, I was getting my little degree in it, but I was going back to school, and he called me on the phone. I said, no, I gotta do my homework, and I was like a deer in the headlights. And I walked downtown, and my aunt was downtown working at the YMCA, and the building was shaking, and she had all the kids, and the glasses were falling from the ceiling.
Tiles coming down.
And then people in a restaurant that was there, 50 of them got killed because the grass exploded in where they, and with other cabins there, but they don't say now. Like I was telling you, when the floor went down, there was a white shirt there, and he tried to get in the office. You know, he was in the office, and his white shirt was this thing, and it was on the filing cabinet behind it, and all through there, you walk downtown, and that white shirt stayed up on that floor.
Yeah.
My son had a mechanic business on Southwest 89th that day,
Uh-huh.
a 5-bay, and he said when that went off, he thought somebody had run into all 5 of his big lifting doors.
Yeah.
Because they just moved in on him.
Oh, wow.
And that's how, and that 89th Street from downtown Oklahoma City is quite a ways.
Yeah.
So that was a serious.
Yeah, there's a lot of, after the big shock from the blast was really powerful.
Yeah. A lot of windows broke.
Oh, yes, then.
My cousin's husband was an FHA appraiser in Oklahoma City. And he was due on the 6th or 7th floor, I think, at 9 o'clock that morning. And talk about divine providence. He said it was one silly thing after another until the bomb went off. He never made it, and the chair he was going to be sitting in front of this guy's desk, everything went to the street. From about 6 inches in front of that desk, just went clear to the street.
Yeah. There's a lot of strange stories. Some of them we're thankful for, some of them we pray.
And everybody knew somebody that was killed there. The one woman, she paid Murrah before he was killed. And on Northeast 36th Street, they had this meeting where everybody meet, and they had this monkey, little ring-tailed monkey. And when some of the people were crying there, he went up to this woman, and a tear was falling from her eye. He took his fingers and he touched the tear in her eyes. And it was a record about somebody's very far from here, somebody's crying, Lord, not very far from here.
Yeah.
So that came out.
Okay. We getting any closer, guys?
Hang on.
You know, Joe can keep going on, I can start.
All right, go ahead and let Charles
I'm gonna
start.
sign in with my account, but I can't remember my password because I had to change it recently, so I'm just going to.
Jose Jimenez.
I apologize for this happening, but at Murphy's Law, I put the presentation on 2 of these. I looked at them after I did it, make sure they're there. I'm becoming more like my dad. And so, and I had a backup plan to the backup plan. It got us anyway, but I'm surprised we're getting so close to having a presentation that we can look up here, hopefully. But I appreciate you guys coming and inviting me to come and speak to you. I tried to listen a little bit what Glenn and the rest of you were talking about. But let me ask this, how many people feel like they know quite a bit about the Oklahoma City bombing at this point in time? Just a quick show of hands.
Read in the paper.
I mean, you kind of follow it and that kind of thing. It helps me know better how to maybe move. You know, when I first got involved in this, it wasn't something like you can just, you know, go ask somebody, even if you do, which I did, that had done something like this. They said, well, here's what's gonna happen, you know, here's what you need to know. But it's probably like having a baby or going into the military or war or something. They can tell you what it's gonna be like, but you really find out when you get there. And so, and that's what it was like for me. It was like, it was a real unique experience. So 28 years later, here we are talking about this. And I just put one of these presentations together back in April for OPAC down in Oklahoma City. The first time I'd given it in probably 2 or 3 years, although I've done this probably about 600 plus times, kind of radio, together. So I could talk about it forever. But what happened was, kind of lost my train of thought there. When I went through it this time, it was kind of interesting, a little revelation for me. It wasn't a big deal, but you know how time goes by and you go, you know, now I understand what happened with that or what was being done there. I had one of those kind of a little mini epiphany, like, not that I didn't know, but I feel real certain, and I'm just gonna tell you, here's what I believe happened. Did you get it done, Joe?
Yeah, I got both of them.
Wow. Okay, good, we got something to work with. But, you know, it just hit me putting this presentation together back in April again and going through everything one more time, even though I've done it a jillion times. It was like, it's obvious what happened here. It's obvious that what they said didn't happen, and what did happen, this is what I believe, and the evidence is just overwhelming. If you took it to a trial, you could convince anybody of this, I believe, most people, that it was a sting operation that went bad. That's the simple way to understand it, because it was a sting operation. And they were tracking and they were surveilling. There's tons of evidence of it. And then it obviously blew up in their faces. We all, I'm just saying this because it's a matter of reason. I don't mean that I think that they would have done it on purpose or anything like that. But obviously it blew up in everybody's faces, figuratively and literally. It didn't happen without anybody knowing. There's enough evidence that they knew something was going to happen. So the big question is, what did happen? I mean, why did it happen like that? Why were they not able to stop it? And why would they lie about it? Why would they just cover it up? And I think there's some real unfortunate, like we're finding out in these times, some unfortunate reasons that we really don't like to consider and think about our government. I remember, you know, we got quickly into an oppositional kind of a framework or posture with those that wanted to take up for the government side, like Governor Frank Keating. I'm not knocking him, I'm just saying Keating was on that side. He was a governor at the time. unfortunately, most people, when they're in public office, they think they've got to take up for fill in the blank, the government or whoever. Whether that's a good old boy deal or just, the pressure, whatever it is. And so he was doing that. So he had a lot of things to say about those that were simply raising questions, a lot like we see today. It's like maybe kind of a mini version. It wasn't a mini version for us because we were feeling the heat, and everything. But he would say things like, those people are howling at the moon. Or, I can't believe, this is the one that really generates a lot of feeling. He said, well, I can't, as the press come back and they would ask him, what about what these people are saying, blah, blah, blah. And he said one time, he goes, well, I can't believe that all of those federal officers and everybody would leave all of those people in that building and the children there to be slaughtered. That's the words he used. And I believe were meant to cause emotions to go to one side or the other, or to reject, what we were saying. So there's a lot of that going on. It still goes on. It's always gone on. And the problem is, let's see if I can get this thing started here. I guess I'll just make that bigger, right, Joe?
Yeah, if you want to run the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Is it ready to go?
Yeah, you should do this.
Like right there?
Yeah.
Okay, this is not my regular one, but we'll go with this one. That right there, isn't that amazing that a crew came from all over, but a crew wrote that down after they went through some number of days of taking bodies out, finding people, rescuing
You
people.
had to go full screen on that picture.
Okay.
We can't see that.
How about that?
You wanna start the slideshow?
Yeah, let's see. I just click it to make it go, right?
You gotta click on,
Slideshow.
Little projector at the bottom of the strip,
huh?
bottom right. It's a projector icon, so just
From the beginning.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Go, there we go.
They look the same.
Well, hang on.
there you go.
There you go.
Oh, now we.
When we started, I think I'll just do this like this. I think I'll just talk like I was doing a radio interview, basically. When I got, one of the big questions people ask me, why did you do this? What was the reason? And I have to tell you the same thing I've always said, not that I've always done the right thing or always, when I've seen something like this, always stand up and oppose it or something. But at that time, it caused me to feel like there was something wrong, there was something more, and somebody had to do something. And that burden fell on me, and so that's what compelled me to do it and continue to keep going. I feel like I was compelled to do it. And that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. That's what drove me to keep going, and it does still today. After 28 years, and even before that, I learned a lot. Even before that, about how our government works. When I was growing up, one of the most important things to me was God, Jesus, the Bible, the history of our country, the founding of this country. It always really was impressed on me, those things growing up, how important those were, and how fortunate we all are to have the opportunity to live in a society or a culture like we do. Amen. As opposed to Africa or be over in a country where they're really dictatorial. And so that's what really pushed me forward. And as I began to talk to people privately about questions, and there were many of us that were starting to work together, you might remember that there were two groups that kind of, went two different ways. And it basically started, the ones that were raising questions were the ones that got most of the publicity and attention at first. And you might remember the redheaded grandmother and mother that had two little boys that died in the daycare center. Kathy Wilburn, her daughter Edie, her husband Glenn was a champion in the investigation of this case. Well, we started meeting each other, talking to each other, And I started working with Glenn Wilburn and J.D. Cash, John Cash, if some of you know who he is, he's passed away. And started sharing information and started moving forward and started thinking about, well, what do we do now? You know, nobody had ever really done anything like this. And so we formed an organization and started, you know, kind of moving forward. At the same time, you had Jana Davis with Channel 4 doing the investigation she did. She was focused on Middle East. She became determined in her mind that it was Middle East, that was it. And she didn't really want to hear anything else. J.D. Cash, or John Cash, worked with him real closely, and he was just the opposite. A lot of people thought he was working for the other side, because anytime Middle East would come up, he would just blow his top, literally. I mean, he'd just freak out and cuss like a sailor and call people names and all kinds of stuff, like he was trying too hard. What we tried to do is we tried to use a standard on the information, like most investigators, and we learned from investigators, people that had been in law enforcement and otherwise, and we took their advice also. We were fortunate we were able to hire a couple of private investigators, and so we took the information and let it take us to where, you know, it led us. And so this whole book is full of it. And we put everything in that, for the most part, that you would take before a jury. So if you had a trial, you know, you can't just take everything there. It has to have a certain quality to it, a standard. And there's a lot more information that could be considered. So as we move forward, we started getting information about, like, the building, the bombs, the John Doe's, the prior knowledge, all of it. And it was just a big jumbled pile of stuff that information just kept mounting. So we started organizing it. And I organized it basically for our group in two different, in categories. So you had John Doe's, you had prior knowledge, you have the damage to the building, explosive devices, experts, everything related to that. And maybe another category or two, and you'll see in the final report how it lays out. And under the category of damage to the building, I did not think, because I think I'm pretty much average, like the average person probably, in terms of science and this subject matter. I thought it's so technical and most people don't know it. You know, they don't take enough science, I didn't, in other science subjects, and study it to really understand and know how these things work and don't work. So just to expound on that, somebody could say, hey, this building was blown up by fill in the blank, you know, one fertilizer bomb out front and it did all that damage that we're looking at right here. And I could easily, now I'm not a cynic, but I'm become that way. The older you get and the more you're in government. So I would probably question it anyway, but you know what I'm saying. You know, you kind of take that. I didn't think it would work, but actually some in our group did. They were really adamant about it. But in any event, we had a whole long list of experts. Most of them were in that book. The world's experts, like General Ben Parton. We were told by many people that are experts, like in commercial applications and even in military and former military. We were told by them that this is their words, he was the expert's expert. But there's another man in there named George Hansen, who I never met face to face, talked to him on the phone, but when you look at his credentials, I mean, he's an expert's expert. He studied and taught blast wave overpressure principles and things like that in universities all over the world. And so, the rest of them are in there. You can read their backgrounds. Those people, Sam Cohen, the inventor of the neutron bomb. Galen Windsor, one of the inventors of the atomic bomb, all of them, and others, said this couldn't happen. Both the amount of damage and the pattern couldn't happen with this ammonium nitrate bomb. It doesn't matter if they pick almost any number. You might remember, and we have this in the report, you might remember some previous terrorist attacks in the past, like one called Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia about 35 years ago, probably something like that. And there's a picture in the final report that looks something like this without the cutout. What it did is it blew the face off this big building. They pulled up a tanker truck full of ammonium nitrate and whatever kind of fuel they use. The experts said it doesn't matter if all of a sudden they're using jet fuel. Somebody may remember along the way that the FBI said, you know, it was diesel fuel and fertilizer. Then they said, well, we found out, oh, it was jet fuel, which kind of jacked it up some. It may a little bit, but it's not going to make any kind of difference to do this. Is what all the experts say. So back to Cobar Towers, they pulled this great big, a big tanker truck you see pull in front of the gas stations, full, and it just blew the face off that. That's also in consideration of the types of buildings that are built outside of the U.S. and probably a lot of Europe and other places. They're not that good at construction. I had one expert say, or it's a military guy, he said, you know, those buildings, I remember being in wherever he was at, in a building like that, and he said you could take a pencil and grind it into the concrete. You know, that's how soft it is, and it doesn't have either any rebar, or it doesn't have as much rebar. So it would have been easier to do damage to that Cobar Towers, is my point. And it still just blew the face off of it, with even a lot bigger one than they claim happened in Oklahoma City. And there's other examples. There's one in Bogota, Colombia. You know, many will remember Lebanon, the bombs there. But this is real important because we really can know these things, and the experts have all chimed in. No one's come out on the other side and said, no, here's exactly how it worked and could have worked or did work. No one's done that. There's some people that have given some very minor lip service to the government side, and some of those work for the government. But no one's come out and said, no, you know, calling you know what on this and say you guys are full of it. Nobody's done that. So the damage to the building is very important, and here's some other important things about it. Is there were people that worked there that fortunately survived, and as they were coming to work the couple of 3 days, maybe and into the previous week, as they came in, and some of them parked at the garage below the building, and as they parked, got out of their vehicles and were going to the elevator, they saw people working, and they noticed it and paid attention to it and talked about it later. I won't go into detail with that just because of time, because there's lots of stories that we'll talk about. But there were some real suspicious activities before that happened. And so I remember, here's one of the stories. Jane Graham worked for HUD, and she worked on the top floor, the 9th floor, and they were supposed to have a computer training meeting that was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. So people are kind of coming in, getting ready. Bomb goes off 9:02, 9:03 in that range. And so she's getting people ready, and she's making an announcement. She's saying, okay, let's get in our chairs and everything, and everybody get ready. And so people are kind of still, and then the building starts shaking, and she says, and people are acting like, what's going on? She speaks up and says, hey, it feels like an earthquake. Everybody ought to get underneath their desk or something, which they did. That comment has been made by multiple people. Some of you may have heard yourself. But Jane Graham was in that meeting. It started, so they got under the desk. Others, that after the bombing, as news people came up to them and they were walking out of the building or walking down the street, this is all on record, asked them. One guy had originally lived in California for a long time and worked there for the federal government. And he said, well, you know, I worked in California in the past and we had earthquakes all the time. He said, we thought it was an earthquake. I got underneath my desk. That's the only thing that saved me. So there's multiple comments like that. Back to the damage to the building, the science, the explosives. This is another thing that could have got by me. I might have, before I learned everything that I've learned, if I heard what I'm getting ready to talk about, I might have thought, well, maybe not. You know, you're just unsure when you don't know these things. But the fact is, the way this works, and I know a bunch of you here know, you know this from your own experience better than I do. If you have an ammonium nitrate bomb out front of that big building, and we're all up there in our offices, and it goes off, so it's set off right now, and we're 9 stories up. Does it take 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000? How many seconds does it take before it reaches up and blows through the windows? Or if it can shake the building, before we start feeling it and going, hey, something's going on here, maybe we ought to get under our desk. We get under, then it blows through the windows. You might think that. I would have maybe kind of questioned that, but I would have thought, maybe, maybe not. I don't know how these things work. Here's what the experts say. The experts call big time BS. That's Barbara Streisand or Blue Smoke. It does not work like that. When that bomb goes off downstairs and for us upstairs, it's like immediate to us, just like if we're standing right next to it. You could not tell the difference. So what is that shaking, all that shaking going on? It's other explosive devices in that building, and you can see this is General Parton's, one of his diagrams, and you can see on there some of the X's with a red X and a red square, and those are columns, concrete reinforced columns, et cetera, et cetera. And so what that tells us is there was explosives going off, and that building was starting to come down. And those people had about 2 or 3 or 4 seconds to recognize it, maybe make some kind of communication with each other, and then it happened. VZ Lawton, who became one of the board members on our organization back then and when it still existed, he was a victim in the bombing. He was on the 8th floor, and he was in back away from the front and behind a column where he probably wouldn't. He's already passed away, but he wouldn't have survived the bombing either. But he said, I was right next to this column. I was just signing some papers, and he saw some lights flickered, heard something. And he said, boom, next thing he knows, he's knocked out. He wakes up some minutes later, gets up, and he tells a real interesting story. I just finished telling that story. I wish I had a good video of it. He said, VZ was a fantastic guy. He's everybody's friend, very social. So he knew everybody, not just in the building, but around. There was a post office across the street. He knew those people. So the bombing happens. He comes back a few days later to the post office and just kind of catching up with people. He's talking to the people in the post office, and they're talking. The lady says, well, VZ, hey, we might have a picture of you from the bombing. He goes, what do you mean? She goes, my daughter was taking classes at Central State at the time, and she came down immediately. She'd been taking a photography class in addition to her regular classes. And she came down immediately because her mom worked downtown, found out she was okay, and she started taking pictures. So she happened to be looking at the Murrah building. She took a picture right when VZ got knocked out. He got up and he walked out like this. I mean, his desk was here, and there was probably maybe that much building left going all the way to the end there. And so he came out and looked around like this. Well, there's a black and white photo of a little thin man, thin stick man looking like that. It's real eerie looking. It happened to be him. She happened to catch that photo. But this right here, this diagram shows you a couple of things. It shows when you look at I don't know if my pointer's going up there or not. It shows that circle shows the crater from which the truck would, where the truck sat. And it shows that deep, they called it a horseshoe, that deep part into the building there. And so when that explosive device went out, when you see ground zero there, that red dot in the middle of the concentric circles, then it diminishes real quickly. This is how my simple mind, and I've always tried to explain it like this. We've all played with firecrackers and stuff like that. If we got a styrofoam cup empty or a paper cup that you drink coffee or something out of, and we got rubber bands or tape or something to put a black cat on there, like a little black cat firecracker, and set that off, it might blow off. If we laid it next to it first and set it off, it might move the cup a little bit over, but it's almost certainly not going to pop a hole in it or anything. But if you attach something to it, it'll do some damage. And so the blast wave overpressure diminishes is a lot as it goes out. So it doesn't have the power to knock any of these things down. That's why they can't, that's why they know, General Parton and the rest of them, Parton conducted these tests, extensive tests for many, many years. The Air Force will blow up everything under the sun to find out how it works and what doesn't work. So they know how blast wave pressure works. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to tell another story about blast wave overpressure. VZ Lawton, I just told you something about him. VZ had German heritage. His son was in the military over in Germany. And for a number of years, he would travel over there and go see his son. He'd go see some of these relatives that were German. He got a big kick out of that. He went over there in the spring of '97. And he calls me, he's going to be over there for a couple of weeks. He calls me after about halfway in, and he goes, Charles. I said, yeah. He goes, you know, I knew it was important. He's calling me from Germany. He goes, you're not gonna believe what I found out. I said, what is it? I can't tell you. Don't you love that when somebody tells, well, I can't tell you. He says, I can't tell you till we get back because we're afraid somebody might be listening. So I said, well, thanks a lot. I'm gonna have to wait all this time until you get back here. He got back. It was a really dynamic story. It's in the final report. He took a little jaunt trip on the Rhine, you know, while he's there, and with, you know, he just fit into some other thing with some tourists, and they'd go up and down the Rhine, whatever they did, and then they had a dinner that night, and they're sitting around a round table, different round tables, and he's sitting with several people and two ladies that were about in their mid-40s, cousins that came from America to come over and take a little vacation. And so they're now having dinner and they're talking, and VZ had lost some of his hearing because of the bombing. And so ever so often he'd say, huh, excuse me? And so one of them spoke up and said, VZ, you need to get your hearing checked, you know, in a good-natured way. And he goes, well, yeah. He goes, I'll tell you what happened. I was in the Oklahoma City bombing, and that got everybody's attention. They wanted to hear stuff. So he started talking, started telling stories like this. One of the ladies spoke up and said, oh, at some point, as he's telling these stories like we're talking about, she goes, oh, that's probably why we got that call. And he said, what call are you talking about? She said, well, I work at Walter Reed Army Hospital in D.C. area. She said it was either the day before or 2 days before the bombing on a Wednesday, so it was either Tuesday or Monday before the Wednesday. We get a call from somebody that said they were a congressional liaison working with the governor's office in Oklahoma. And they wanted to know what the proper treatment for blast wave overpressure was for victims. And it happened to be, she was in that office. There was about a 5-person office. There's actually an office, and that's what they dealt with, blast wave overpressure. You know, for military and everybody under the sun out there. That's what they specialized in. So that was real mind-blowing. He said, well, can we get back and talk to you, blah, blah, blah. So we had one of our investigators that worked for us that we were able to get his services, was a longtime Marine colonel. He was retired. His name was Roger Charles, and he lived up there. So we kind of tasked him with going up and making the connection. He connected with her when she got back. And he asked her, well, what about your supervisor, who's all in the office, all the details? Can we meet with the supervisor? She said, yeah, I'll introduce you to him. Called him, talked to him. He was real friendly, very nice, said, yeah, it happened. That's exactly what happened, everything that was said. He said, well, did you ever take notes or anything? He goes, yeah, actually I did. I took notes. Would you go look them up and see if you can find them? He goes, yeah, I'll see if I can come up with them. And then Roger got back with him, and he said, I hadn't come up with them yet. And then he contacted the lady again, and then after those two efforts to contact, they just shut down. No communication, just shut it down. So that's that story. Blast wave overpressure. Now, you think the implications of that at least implies that some people were thinking about the possibility of Murphy's Law going wrong, you know, something going wrong. And they were preparing for it. What's the proper treatment for victims of blast wave overpressure? So that was a big story right there. You see, actually, where you see this crater here on this image, it actually was over slightly to your right, which was another thing. The book that, you know, just stating the facts that Keating put out and his staff, it actually had that crater not only there, but even over just a little bit more, and had it lined up with that deep penetration. But it was not there, it was even over more. So, I mean, it make a slight difference in calculations of math and everything, but just the point that it didn't have the ability to do that. One of our experts, this man is named Bob Vernon. He created this and some other really good graphics which show the truck, the blast wave pressure, you know, the main part of it and how it compares to the main columns and header beams of the building and how far away it was. This one is kind of a top view, obviously. Points to the various headers. When you look in the report, if you read all the details like that, what you're going to see is he's referencing some places where header beams or big pillars, the bigger ones or the regular size ones, where they had damage that otherwise wouldn't have been done, you know, that had to have charges attached to them. here's another really good one that Bob Vernon did. So the crater itself, the FBI, you'll see there, the bigger crater is what's claimed by the FBI, 32 feet. Now, somebody could argue about this, you know, I don't know, but this is just the way it all played out. 32 feet is what they said. About 3 months into the bombing, after they'd primarily cleaned up most of the bomb site, you'll see that other circle there that's 28 feet. It says FEMA, BPAT, reported crater. The government decided, the Justice Department decided, well, let's put together a bunch of, because they're getting a lot of questions and stuff, and they got to clean this thing up, in my opinion. They said, let's get a crew of experts to come in and look at this, analyze it, give their opinion, do official report on it. Well, they did that. These people came in and they wouldn't let them come closer than about 100 yards from the building. Let me repeat that. They would not let them look at the building or the remains or out to where they dumped it or anything and examine it, test it, all that kind of stuff. From a distance, they could look at it and they were given the information to write a report. In their report, and you know, I'm not knocking those guys. They were just there to, I'm assuming most of them were just there to play that role. But what you have is then you have the size of the crater when you pull, let's see if we can find it. You saw one already. When you pull off the boards and everything covering up the crater, the actual size of it is a lot smaller. And that's according to the experts. You know, I admit that I'm not an expert on the science and stuff, but according to them, that's the way you would really create the measurement of that crater to then include it in calculations and determinations about what kind of bomb blew this up. So it's real important in that respect. It's not just, hey, it's 32 or it's 22, you know, it matters. There's another picture of the deep penetration. Jane Graham, I just mentioned her, and VZ Lawton. They were both in the Murrah building. Here is a real important statement from Tiffany Bible. She was a paramedic. We've got several paramedics that were there on the scene, either immediately or, you know, the next 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, 45 minutes down the road. And then they were treating people, and then they had conversations with different agents and other folks. And in this case, Tiffany Bible happened to be very close. So she was pretty much downtown. She was there right away. So she was on the south side of the building. She gave this affidavit. She had conversations with, can you see that? Yeah, can't read it, but anyway, it's in the report. And she's taking care of somebody. I might mix this up with 2 or 3 other, a little bit, paramedics that said essentially the same thing. You can read this for yourself. But she said she's taking care of somebody, and there's 2 agents that they're talking about how they got called and brought into, well, they were talking, and she spoke to one of them and said, so you guys were in the building, right? And they go, no, we weren't in the building. Because she said, well, you got people in the building, we've got to go help get them out of there. That's what she was initiating. And they said, no, we weren't in. They were called in and paid not to come in. And there's some other real important stuff in her story here. I'll let you read it, but for time, I'm not going to drill down into too much. Catherine Mallet is another one, EMP that might be in this presentation. She also was there and was doing the same thing, taking care of some people. There's an agent or 2 standing there. There's 2 of them talking to each other, and they talk about a bomb, another bomb that they took out. Lots of good stories about that. And Ali Hussein, this guy that we just showed, Jana Davis believes that he is John Doe number 2 or one of the John Does. It would be my opinion that he might be one of the John Does, very possibly, very likely even. But there's others, and it's not just a Middle Eastern deal. These are the different John Does that have the different sketches that have been sketched about people that were seen downtown, either with McVeigh or otherwise in a Ryder truck, for example. The one on your right is, I'm sorry, I meant the one on your left is, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing off the walls here, folks, sorry. Let me slow down a little bit. The one in the middle, if you can read it, it says, Jeff Davis delivered Chinese food to this John Doe at the Dreamland Hotel. So in the week or two before the bombing, the week or 10 days before, as we know, McVeigh, Nichols and others were up in Kansas and doing things, and they got the Ryder truck up there. Well, he stayed at a hotel called the Dreamland Hotel, and I've been there and went up and talked to people, interviewed them all back in the day, and the FBI really went out of their way to try to cover this up. So McVeigh and whoever was with him in his room ordered some Chinese food. This guy had delivered it. This is the sketch of the guy that, I mean, not the guy that delivered it, but who he saw. He comes to the just cheap hotel room, got the Chinese food, door opens, McVeigh does the transaction. He opened the whole door. He didn't try to, do anything like that. He opened it wide. They do the transaction. There's another guy sitting right there in the bed, waiting for the food. They do the thing, blah, 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 talk, thanks a lot, goes. Well, he talks to the FBI, Jeff Davis, and he tells them about this. And they, according to him, they weren't very interested. And then they had Jeannie Bolin. If you've ever heard of her, she's that famous FBI sketch artist. She's written books and stuff. And some of this was on TV about exactly what I'm telling you now. And so she came in to do the sketch of his John Doe, other John Doe there. And as they're doing it, well, she asked him, and he tells her his story. And she thought, what? There's another guy there? Because they didn't say anything to her about it and all that. She goes back to them and said, do you understand there's a John Doe there? Yeah. Thanks a lot. We appreciate your help. See you later. And it was pretty much like that, according to her. They didn't really want to get into it. Rodney Johnson was driving a great big catering kind of truck right in front of the Murrah building. He's one of those lucky ones that, a lot of people have stories. I was supposed to be there at that time, but something stopped me from being there at that time, or I would have been right in front of the building or something. He was pulling this big truck, had those big doors on the side, those kind of doors you see for catering and stuff. He's pulling up, and they had just pulled up the Ryder truck and everything in front of the building. He didn't know that. He's just driving real slowly, and McVeigh comes walking right out between cars like that in front of his truck, real close, and he had to throw his brakes on. And McVeigh walks over to the parking lot where they had the yellow Mercury marquee and takes off. But he gets a really good look at him, and he calls the FBI. They think he might be the very first one that called the FBI, but also saw McVeigh and called in before any news articles came out. So, to me, it's somewhat of a minor detail. Like we just saw those John Doe pictures a minute ago. So before anybody was biased by seeing these or anything else that was out there, he had called in. He wasn't biased by any reports or anything. And they said, oh, we're going to call you. You're going to be in the trial, blah, 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 blah. And like they told everybody that, but they brought no one there to the trial in Denver against McVeigh except one person. We might bring that up in a minute. This is one of the most important characters in this whole case, Andreas Strassmeyer. I've kind of got this on the front of my mind because there's a British author that's in Oklahoma City doing some things related to the bombing. He wanted to interview me. He was real interested in this guy, so we talked about him. Does anybody know who Andy Strassmeyer is? Know anything about the bombing or not that you kind of know who this guy is? He was a captain or maybe as a major in the German military. He's German.
He's the guy that slipped out.
Yeah.
Like that morning or whatever.
You mean slipped out of the country?
Yeah.
Well, actually, they let him stay. I'm going to tell that. It's a lot worse than that. So he supposedly came to the U.S. because he was a Civil War buff, and he wanted to just go around and learn about the Civil War. In doing that, I made this point to this author yesterday. I said, in doing that, supposedly he went to these, they call them militias, and I say they're not militias. Elohim City, it might be a militia by one definition, but the militias I'm familiar with, people that have militias that are part of it, they create one or they join one. It's not the same as Elohim City in the places he was going to. He was going to places where people were really radical, racist even, and they really didn't have a political philosophy so much as they just wanted to fight the government and overtake them. It's more criminal in my mind. So he's going to places like that. If you're really a Civil War buff, why would you hang out with those different groups like that all over the South? So he went all over the South and made his way to Elohim City. While he's at Elohim City, prior to the bombing, 6 months to maybe up to a year before, things were going on, okay? So he was there, people were doing things, people come in and out of LM City and places like that. They're not all, I'm not taking up for LM City, so don't anybody get the wrong impression. They're not, everybody doesn't live there and part of their family or whatever, you know, their congregation or whatever they call it. Some people go in and out, and McVeigh was one of those, and others, and he was kind of like that. While they were there, and they would have meetings, get-togethers, he would say to the rest of them, well, we need to take our war, these are quotes coming straight out of the ATF reports that you have. If you've got the report, you can read it yourself. I've memorized it, of course, for so long. We need to start taking our war against the government to a higher level and start blowing up federal buildings, creating mass public shootings, and assassinate politicians, end quote. She reported that to her. Carol Howe reported that, an undercover person. If you know who Carol Howe was, I'll tell a little bit more about that in a minute. But she was just a local Tulsa girl that had started hanging out with those people at the ATF's request later. So he's a provocateur. And then they went and surveilled in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City the federal buildings that exist there, et cetera, et cetera. And you can say, well, the rest is history. Well, I'll fast forward because this case is so comprehensive. There's so much in it. Do most of you know that we caused a county grand jury to be impaneled? A county, Oklahoma County grand jury to investigate the bombing? That was one of my little expertises, is grand juries and stuff like that. So we forced a grand jury to be impaneled. That's a long story in and of itself right there. We forced a grand jury to be impaneled, and so when that grand jury was impaneled just to investigate the bombing, then they're charged with doing the same thing the federal grand jury would do, or the trial would do. Call in evidence, call in witnesses, call in information, blah, blah, blah. They would not call this guy. This is, trust me on this county grand jury part, it's a big story. I can tell you all kinds of shenanigans that happened along the way. We went in, we caused it to be impaneled. We circulated the petition and managed that, caused it to be impaneled. We also went in and testified as members of the committee that did this, and they were antagonistic to us, the prosecutors. They actually played good cop, bad cop. One of them always played bad cop, the female, and the guy always played good cop. They had a good time with us. But my point here is they would not, we supplied them with, like what we have in this report, we had a lot of stuff we'd already gathered like that. We gave them the work to do. You know, we made it easy for them in one sense, and they could do their own investigation. But we had to go back, we didn't have to, we chose to go back to try to hold their feet to the fire to do this job. And this was one of the big cases. We met with Pat Morgan, the male I just referred to, number 2 below, Bob Macy, who'd been there forever, and the female, Suzanne Gunn. And we went in to talk to Macy and them about, you need to subpoena this guy. He's just roaming around the U.S., still here, after all that had happened. So this is like 2 years after the bombing, and we're having this county grand jury. And so now we're having this one little meeting. The county grand jury is ongoing, but we go in periodically and say, hey, why don't you guys do this? You know, we're trying to put pressure on them to do the job right. And on this one, he was just kind of mealy-mouthed. He never would really commit. And then later, like you said, Joe, Strassmeyer got out, left the country. I mean, they didn't stop him. They knew what he was doing. They knew where he was at. He left. He's back in Germany. He's been interviewed, I don't know how many times over the years. But his father was a high-ranking cabinet-level bureaucrat in Germany. So it'd be like, you know, FBI director, assistant, or DOJ, or whatever. He's been in that level of politics all his life. And his mother was I've never known her, but was a well-known German actress. So it kind of tells you where they're at in the society. It doesn't mean anything, but as I add everything up, I consider those things. And the fact that he was like not touchable, you know, the feds didn't want to talk to him, hold him accountable, nobody else. And they're talking, we know they're talking. And so back to the question, what's really going on? This is a statement by Sam Cohen, the inventor of the neutron bomb. I won't spend any more time on that. I had a press conference when I finally decided, not too long after the bombing, it was actually a couple of months, after about 2 months, I decided I was gonna, just dive into this thing. And I had a press conference at the state capitol. When I decided to do this, I also called the governor, Keating, and his chief of staff. I called the Democratic leaders in the House and the Republicans. I said, look, here's what I've been doing. Some of them already knew it. I said, this is what I'm gonna do next. And they were all kind of like, okay. Like, we don't wanna have anything to do with it. So we had this press conference, and I had General Parton there, another man I just mentioned, Galen Windsor, one of the inventors of the atomic bomb, Ted Gunderson. Most of these people have passed, all these people have passed away now. Ted Gunderson, who has been in the news again lately, even though he's deceased. He was one of the top FBI agents. He ran the LA Bureau. I believe it was the Houston or the Dallas Bureau. And he was even considered for an FBI appointment for the cabinet at one time. He came out like Parton did with his own report about why the bombing couldn't have happened like they said. And it was a pretty thick report. And talked about other possibilities, one in particular that he thought it might have been the one that they used, but it was not. He was totally adamantly against ammonium nitrate being able to do that. Interesting about him is that he really started telling a lot of things that he knew and had information about when he had been in the FBI once he left it. Really good guy. This is Abner Mikva. I did an interview one time, and at the time it didn't seem to make that much difference, because I had done this press conference and had these people I just named there. Sam Cohen was going to be there, but he was going to fly out, and the Unabomber was going on back then.
No.
And so what happened was the Unabomber hung up the LA airport at that time. Somebody might remember this. Just shut it. He couldn't fly out. So what Channel 4 did, they got their affiliate in LA to just do an interview with him. So we had this press conference, and it just kept looping through the weekend. The press conference, they kept covering it, and they got him on and had the inventor of the neutron bomb. Now that's actually Abner Mikva, but Sam Cohen, is adamant about that, and it was very, very well publicized. Abner Mikva, this guy, longtime Democratic operative, used to be a judge, also was a congressman. He's passed away now. I was getting ready to tell a story about, I got called to do an interview. They called and said, Court TV, we want you to be on. We do it, yeah. Go down to OU, they'll shoot you up in the OU studio, and there'll be somebody from Macy's office there to do a side-by-side, kind of go back and forth on the bombing. They sent an assistant down there. He didn't want to be there. He didn't care. He wasn't going to say anything provocative, so he's actually a pretty good guy. And so we're sitting there, and I'm saying the more dynamic stuff, and he's just saying, well, yeah, this, that, I don't know, I can't talk about it, or whatever. After it's over with, we kind of go off the side and take all the microphones off of us. We start talking. It kind of got his interest, so he's kind of really wanting to hear some things I was saying. And I forget all the things that led up to that, but at one point he goes, well, I can tell you who's running this thing. He goes, I'm on a conference call. There's a conference call we have at least once a week on Monday, sometimes more than once if there's more to be talked about, from DC, from the DC, I'll call them operatives in the Justice Department that are running this thing. And he said, when Macy doesn't want to be on it or can't be or something, I'll be on it. He said, it's Jamie Gorelick, longtime Hillary Clinton and Clinton buddy, Abner Mikva, another one, and Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland. That's the first time I heard Merrick Garland's name, I think. And at the time, it was, well, these are the people that are controlling this deal. Now we know a lot more about Merrick Garland. I saw somebody refer to him this morning. I was looking at some stuff, call him the fixer. I think that's what we all ought to call him the fixer. If you ever get online and do anything, call him Garland the Fixer or something. Because people need to know he's been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. I learned a lot of other things that he's done. Now I ran to the end of that one presentation. Let's see if I can get this other one. Anybody have any? Let's just kind of do a free flow here since we kind of got off the start. Let me just take a few questions if anybody has any questions right now while I'm kind of bringing this up.
I have a question.
Okay.
Have you ever heard anything about Eric Holder having anything to
Not directly, you know, I think he was Attorney General during part of it, wasn't he? And you know, that's why we did that report, because you forget things, and I forget if he had something directly related to the bombing.
I had just heard a rumor to that effect.
It probably, you know, they're all on the same team, and so they're gonna help do whatever they wanna do.
Some of the stuff may be in your book, but, like the surveillance cameras going down in sequence as the truck approached the building, is that any truth to that?
I don't know if I've even ever heard that, to tell you the truth.
That as the Ryder truck approached the building, the surveillance cameras from different businesses all went down in sequence. And that footage was lost. All but two, was it FBI or ATF agents, were basically called off that morning, but there were two guys that were actually there that died in the explosion.
No FBI agents
No,
died.
I could've
No
sworn it
ATF,
was-
no FBI.
I could have sworn there was something along those lines. Talking about, there was people that talked about 911 calls going in before the bomb went off.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's, back to prior knowledge, let's talk about that for a little bit. Talk about a call, you know, the Justice Department in DC got a call 24 minutes before the bombing.
Yeah.
This is all documented, legitimate, been reported in the past more, over and over again. So how did they get, somebody called in and says, hey, a bomb went off at the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. That's about all there was to
24
it.
minutes before it went off.
What's going on there?
That earthquake feeling was sequence of like a small explosions going off in series, which is, you know. Did you ever talk about Officer
Yakeley?
or is it Yakeley?
Yep. Not yet, but we did talk about him, and actually I met his whole family and his wife. They were getting a divorce, and went out to the site with all of his mother, two sisters, and a son-in-law, brother-in-law. So here's a story on Yakey. The thing about Yakey is he never shared much of what he was doing with other people. So it's really hard to tie real hard evidence to, he had all this really dynamic bombing evidence, and that's why they got him. That's what everybody believes that look into this, because it can't be what they said, suicide, and here's why. So I meet the family, we go out to where he shot himself, which is just west of El Reno Penitentiary off of I-40. Probably everybody kind of knows that, more or less. It's flat area like a lot of Oklahoma and like Kansas, it's just flat. And the barbed wire fence go up and down, two-lane paved road, and then every so often there's a creek. So Yakey was a big dude like you, probably. And somebody like me would have struggled to do this. So he had a Toyota Corolla, as I recall. So they found the car allegedly on the side of the road, locked with lots of blood in the pan. And then they say he got out, went through this, walked down, here's the barbed wire fence running, went through the barbed wire fence, walked down to the creek down a little ways down. More barbed wire going in front of a big culvert, which is, I think, if I remember, it's about this tall, something like that. A guy like me, how would I get, I'd struggle to get through there. But he goes through the barbed wire, goes through that, goes through the barbed wire on the other side of it, and then walks about this is what the official records claims, 1/2 to 3/4 mile this way, following that creek. And then he allegedly had cut his wrist like this.
Didn't he also supposedly cut his throat?
Yeah, there was cuts there.
So
a
the
cut
whole
there.
inside of his car was covered with blood. Car's locked, no blood on the outside of the car.
And then when he gets all the way that way, he wasn't dead yet, so he decided to take his revolver out like this
And shot
and shoot
himself
himself.
at a downward angle, and the gun wasn't there. They never recovered the gun. They just immediately ruled it a suicide.
Like Hillary did it.
Actually, you say that, but it was the same, hang on, it was the same, angle that was used, that they shot him in the head, and they found some people outside of Waco.
Oh, is that right? Probably Vince Foster and some of those things.
Same direction anyways, but, yeah.
I had we talked to police officers that were friends of Yaki. I had one, he was a black man. There's a black female that I've been friends with since for 40 years. And she became a police officer. And I asked her, she goes, I knew Yaki. Yeah, we got along good. Everybody said he was happy. He wasn't depressed. He had these two little girls. He was a great father. He was total in love with those girls and everything. He wouldn't have shot himself.
That he was one of the first on scene after the bombing.
He was a police officer.
He was Oklahoma City police officer. Yep. This looks like the same one. Any other questions?
Whatever happened to David Hoffman?
Well, that's funny you asked that, because this same British author that's in town, I guess these are the same presentation. He was particularly interested in Hoffman. Hoffman died.
Yeah,
This,
that's the one he just did.
yeah, they look like they're the same. David Hoffman died in Poland a few years after the bombing. He was a interesting guy. It looks like it's basically the same.
Did you put that third one in the Google Drive?
I can't, if you don't mind looking for it, I appreciate it, because I can't do that, two things at once. Is that it right there?
Yeah.
There was a rumor that, on that day, because when it happened, that the FBI knew that it was gonna be a bombing that day, but they didn't tell anybody. And then it was sort of hushed after, but several people came forward because nobody from the FBI was there, and they wondered how come nobody was there. And somebody said from the FBI, well, we were told not to be there. But they were saying, if they were told not to be there, why didn't you tell anybody else not to be there?
Yeah, I mean, as you work through this thing, it's clear, it can get you frustrated, and you can think, I just want to kind of leave it alone maybe, or come back to it later, that kind of thing. But as I've looked at this, the facts are the facts. It doesn't mean we have to know all the answers. And that's been one of the first frustrating things about all of this, is that, when they cover something up, they control it, they kind of own it and everything, and so you can't bust through there and get the information you need. So they can lie and do all kinds of things, or just ignore, and, yes, sir?
Do the facts point to a probable reason for this?
Well, okay, did I tell the story? I apologize, I'm getting to work. This year, all of a sudden, there's such a big interest in the bombing. I've given a lot of just talks or one-on-ones with interviews or something, so I forget who I've talked to, so I forget if I said this today, I apologize. But what was your question again? You said?
Do the facts point to a probable cause or reason for this bombing?
Well, it was, did I tell the story of our Congressman Jim Inhofe, who was a senator later on? I really kept this kind of somewhat low-key because of naming names, but so much time has gone by, and I've said it a few times, I just talk about it anymore. So I'm at the Capitol, and people come up somewhat frequently during that first couple of years, want to give me information, tell me things. A lot of it's redundant, some of it's kind of crazy stuff, but a lot of it's legit too. So it's an interesting experience. So I would get a piece of paper, like, just printed with things on it, kind of like line items or something a little bit. And then it was signed at the bottom, by Dove, the name Dove. So I could tell it wasn't just random kind of out there stuff or something that somebody was just putting down that they heard or saw on the internet or whatever. I'm not demeaning any of that. I'm just saying, I knew it wasn't just kind of random stuff. It sounded like it was real specific stuff that somebody had been told or knew about it. So I told Leslie one time, my secretary at the time, I said, look, have you ever seen this lady? She goes, actually, I've only seen her once. When I was coming back from lunch, she slid something underneath our door and took off, and I didn't know, who she was. I didn't have any reason to talk to her. I said, well, if you see her come again, tell her the same thing we tell everybody else. I can't do anything with this unless I talk to you and know more about it, and can kind of vet it, and it'd be confidential and anonymous and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of thought, I probably won't hear anything back from her. Right away, she happened to come through again, and Leslie talked to her. She agreed to meet with me. She is about a middle-aged, about a 45 at the time, probably about a 45-year-old registered nurse in town. Real, just God's, green earth kind of people, or however you say it. Just a down-to-earth person, really good person. The story is this: she and her family, rural, more rural, they're not city, they're rural, and they were strong family. They get together a lot for holidays, birthdays, and stuff. A brother, all of them are adult siblings, and the parents are still alive. A brother worked for Inhofe when he was a congressman down in Durant, in that office that existed there at that time. And she said, well, he's the one that was telling us stuff because he's had conversations with people and this, that, and the other. And it was about the bombing, but it was also about some other subjects. So I said, well, would you ask him if he would talk to me? I thought, well, that's not ever gonna happen, It's hard when you get in that position to stick your neck out like that. And so she talked to him and he agreed. I couldn't believe it. I drove down there with this man I referenced earlier, Roger Charles. We drove down there with a little foyer office and then a small office, a door in between. And he didn't want Roger to come in. He goes, Representative Key, just you, please. I'd also started recording stuff. And I had a micro cassette in this coat pocket. And he was a sharp guy, a good guy. I'd like to talk to him again. And immediately before we got started, he goes, Representative Key, are you recording this? Just like that. And I thought, I got caught. I said, yeah, I took it out and turned it off. And then we had this conversation, which the essence of, and the main part was, he has lots of conversations. He's talking to a assistant DOJ and an assistant ATF about the bombing and just making comments, and he's asking them something or another. And they said, well, look, the genesis of the Oklahoma City bombing was what happened at Waco. And it was a fake sting operation to make the ATF look good for what they did in Waco and Ruby Ridge. Because they almost got axed, so they're worried they're gonna get axed. So the genesis, this is why I say it's a sting operation, not just because of this. There's lots of information that shows us this was a sting operation. There were people, in position to stop somebody, to catch them, to do something like a sting operation. Not kind of, sort of, a sting operation. There's too much information like that. And so, and I asked him, I drilled down, I said, is that how they said it? They say it just like that? He said, that's exactly how they said it. The genesis of the bombing was after Waco and Ruby Ridge. They thought they were gonna get axed. They were worried about that, so they wanted to go do some good thing. So that's the story on that. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I think that part of that was also, this was a way for them to start gingerly nudging out. They had already, the Patriot Act that we passed after 9/11, they had started drafting it before the Murrah bomb. So you start doing stuff like this, whether they meant to kill people or not is irrelevant. That was one of those things that they were looking to try to push on people. And you have to understand that a lot of these people in government, they don't think about sacrificing people the way that we think about it. We think it's evil. But there are people out there that are literally sociopaths that it's just, you gotta break some eggs to make an omelet kind of decision making.
I was always resistant to think that. I've considered it. I was resistant, but I've come to that strong conclusion. And I think if we don't reach that conclusion and work against it to correct it, we're done. And we may be done now. Yes, sir.
I remember when the radio came on before the bombing happened, I had radio, and it named all the dates where April 19th represented. We were talking about Ruby Ridge, and we were talking about all the government did, but they blamed the government, but we have to protect ourselves. And then I say, wow, then after that bombing, so there was a reason why they chose April 19th.
Yeah, and so if you're gonna make a fake sting operation, you do the same thing, whether you're a criminal or not. Really carrying out a criminal act. This could be a criminal act, couldn't it, if they made this up like this?
Who were they supposed to be catching in the sting?
Well, let me go to that in just a second. This guy had been waiting back here.
So Timothy McVeigh could have been a part of the plan?
Could have been, in my opinion. In the past.
Sacrifice or something?
Yeah, in the past, I was very careful to say anything like, well, I'd always say, my mind's open to just about anything. But see, we get accused of saying, you say the government did it, and you say this and that, and we weren't saying that. But the enemy will attack you like that. So you're asking today, Timothy McVeigh, today I'm very willing to say, and I don't care, I'm not running for office, I'm not in office, and that he could very well have been the one inside that was their guy to make it happen the way they wanted to make it happen, or something like that.
When he was going around to different organizations, like you said, McVeigh was too, going around to different militias or whatever, trying to incite people into, into violence or whatever. There was video caught of him inside of a tank or something like that on the military base after he supposedly was discharged from the military.
Yep.
He was supposedly a pretty smart guy, but for him to jump in a car and take off with no license plate on it.
Well, here's another thing about McVeigh, is his sister said early on when she was interviewed, I'm trying to remember where this was, but she said her brother told her and the family that he was actually not just leaving the military, he was going into I want to remember, something like a black ops drug and terrorist interdiction group. And I got one more. I got another story to tell you that'll kind of blow your mind a little bit. So you got the sister telling, this is what he told us he's going to go, and that included, they included in the words that she said that they would do stuff like, go after the bad guys, the drug guys, and assassinate political leaders or something like that. So, oh man, you asked me a question. I said I'd come
Who
back
was
to
this
it.
thing supposed to be against?
Well, I mean, we don't know for sure. I mean, if they made it up in the beginning, then it's really their deal. Even if they find some people that are kind of willing to do something. If you watch that Michigan trial of 8 or 6 people that allegedly concocted a kidnapping of Governor Whitmer up there, and they were going to put them all in jail.
Like 2 of them were feds.
Yeah, and they all made it up. They didn't make it up. The feds made it up and somehow got them to kind of do it.
Goad them into it. Yeah.
It was a Fed-created deal, and when I first got into this, I kept hearing stories. People were contacting me from Boston and here and there that years ago, before that, they had been in some kind of a similar kind of case, not as big profile and everything, but it was a similar deal where they find out, well, the FBI is kind of juicing this deal in the first place. They're more of the provocateurs. So, who were they trying to get? They were just trying to make themselves look good. That's the main deal.
If you study enough about Kennedy's assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald was set up in a deal like that. He was visiting militias. And then Jack Ruby was dying of cancer. He was their hitman to get rid of Lee Harvey Oswald.
He's trying to pull me off the top, but before you do, Glenn, let me cover a couple more things real quick.
Go ahead.
I want to make sure, in the trial, here's another thing that's just fiberglass. What's that word? Hard to believe. How about that? So the trial of McVeigh, all this boring, and it's in the trial's in there too. I don't suggest nobody read that. It bores you to death to read the trial stuff, except for some good stuff in there. And here's one of the good ones. The prosecution had to prove, they had to prove certain things. So they bring Lewis Hupp, an FBI agent in the crime lab, dealing with the database of things and fingerprints and stuff like that. So they're asking him questions related to that. So when the defense gets up, they say, okay, Mr. Hupp, how many fingerprints were collected related to the bombing? Fingerprints, palm prints, and all included under one category. And he goes, 1,034, that's the official number, 1,034 fingerprints and palm prints. And he said, Mr. Hupp, how many of those, he said, did you check those against your database of 35 million, as I remember, 35 million fingerprints that you have? What do you think his answer was? No. He goes, what? You didn't do that? He goes, well, there was a list of 8 people that we were given by higher ups to see if any of them matched those people. But they didn't stick it into their system like they always do to see what came out. That thing sticks out. The county bomb squad was there early. I heard some stories about that in the last few days. There's something I thought of and I forgot about it. I was going to tell you a really big story if I can get to it. And if anybody has a question, just bring it up real quick, please.
Any truth to the investigative material for, the whitewater scandal being stored in that building?
No, and that's a hard thing to, to get because they come in and get the documents. Here's a couple of things about that. So, they stopped the rescue effort on the day of the bombing after about 6 or 8 hours. It was in the late afternoon for agents to go in and get documents out of the building, file cabinets, documents, and they were walking around all over downtown picking up paper. They went to lots of effort to get all the paper they could get. There's a guy that I knew that had worked in law enforcement, then he went to work for the Department of Wildlife or something like that. He was off that day. He said, he goes, I was watching the news and stuff, and I thought, man, I'm gonna put my uniform on and go down there and help. So he goes down there and he shows up at the southwest side, and he said as he walked up, some guy in a suit was there, and there was a bunch of highway patrolmen. He said it looked like it was all highway patrolmen and a suit guy that kind of was directed things, and there was a big van pulled up to a door, and the guy yelled at him, or he walked up, and the guy said, hey, you come over here and help us, we need your help. And he said they were carrying out munitions from the ATF's room that they had. They had 2 rooms in there, and some of them weren't just like guns and stuff. They were marked with launchers or something, like some kind of a launcher. Now, whether they were armed or something like that, I don't know. He thought there was some C4 there. I don't know. I just know what his story is. I think it's in that report. Anybody else have a question before we get close to the end here?
Is McVeigh really dead?
I don't know.
No, there's a reason I bring that up, and he knows why.
I don't know. After what we've seen the last few years, I can believe anything.
No one was allowed
Unfortunately, I don't want to.
No one was allowed to view the body, and they basically, like, right after they injected him, they just threw it and they took off. So, anyways,
We have a question over here.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am. Sir, I'm sorry.
Well, I guess I'm curious if this group has no higher motivation than to go around covering their fanny. What good are they when we're going to be invaded by all the cartels?
Some of them are in cahoots with those people, in my opinion. I think it's pretty obvious. So they're not on our side. They're just not. It'd be like
We're
me.
going to solve this problem.
Well, hopefully we'll have an election next year and we can solve it. But I've been watching.
We're going to have an election. God help us, what God will do.
Thank you, sir. I was trying to see if there's any other thing. I know there's something I want to.
Can I do one more question?
The video, somebody brought the videos up. The videos have never, what you said about the videos, I've never heard that. I've never heard that it went out.
they went down sequence.
But they won't release them. They won't release them. They lie about them. We just happened to run into the vendor in Oklahoma City that got the contract with the FBI to take all the surveillance videos and then duplicate them so that they could have copies and stuff like that. And they had people just in there watching everything that was going on, watching every move they make. But it was an interesting conversation to talk to that person and find out, well, how many were there, We asked him if he got to see very much of anything, and he said, they were watching so close, we didn't have the ability to do that, and plus we were so much, we were just mass doing it. But they never released them, and then there's somebody brought up not Yankee, nobody brought up Kenneth Trinidad, who died in the Federal Transfer Center out by the Oklahoma City Airport. And
He was picked up like in California or someplace along the West Coast, wasn't he?
funny story, on the border of Arizona and Mexico, I think it was, or California, Mexico. Yes, sir? You got a question?
Yeah, Joe brought up the car and no license plate, so I had some questions around that. One of the stories behind that was it was parked previous to the Ryder truck being there, and the license plate got stolen. Is there any evidence or anything through your investigation that ties into that, or his apprehension later, just down the road here, that would refute that?
And again, I really apologize for not having that other presentation, because it has some other stuff in it, and it goes to this. If you go to the Journal Record Building back then, and I had a good video now there's the memorial and everything, and if you've been there, there's that brick kind of walkway that goes up against the old Journal Record Building, and there's a walkway out there that faces south, a little stairway. The employees would come out and take a break, smoke, do whatever they're doing. A guy named Gary Lewis, this was just before the bomb went off, he was lucky he went back inside before the bomb went off. He comes out to take a break at about 9 or 5 till probably, something like that, I forget the exact time, and he's south. That platform's like this, a stairway that goes down. And then there's that parking lot right there, and the Murrah building's right there. So a lot of people park there from the Murrah and from Journal Record right there. A lot of cars in there. So he comes out, he said he just kind of stood there for a second. He's gonna walk down that alley over other side of the building to where his car's parked, get something and come back. So he sort of looks, and as he starts walking down, he just happened to notice the yellow Mercury marquee sitting there. And some guy sitting in it. He said he didn't really pay that, attention, except that he paid attention enough to see that. Walks down and gets stuff in his car, comes back that quick. He didn't take any time. He just got it, came back. He's walking through that alley, which it was at the time, and this Mercury marquee came barreling out right by him, going that way towards Robinson Street. And there's a couple of speed bumps down the way there. And he said, here's what he said. He goes, I reacted like that because his car's coming by, so it kind of startled me. And he could see McVeigh and the other guy in there. And he watched it as it went down the alley to the street, hits a speed bump, and he said there was a box, some kind of black box or some kind of bounced up. He could see that. And he saw the tag dangling like this by one bolt. He said that stuck out to him, and it took off down that way. That's the only information. That the other stuff is what's been out there.
Something you didn't mention was how they found debris from the building on the opposite side of where the truck bomb was. How is that possible? Buildings here, bombs here, how would you find debris from the building over here?
You mean south?
Which way did the building face?
So the building faced, where the crater was north. The undamaged building was south, facing south.
Right, but they found debris from the Murrah bombing on the opposite side of the truck.
On the north side of the truck.
Yeah, I'm not bringing up anything that speaks to that right now. I mean, I know there was a lot of talk about that, but nothing that jumps out. Yes, sir.
Who actually owned the Murrah building?
I don't know.
That brings up a question of jurisdiction. And I've always wondered it, and how they could call it a federal building. It implies that they own it, but they can't own it unless certain procedures go through. And so then you get into a question of jurisdiction. And so anyway, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but it could be important to point out the fact that I don't think the federal government could have owned that building.
Well, what a lot of us have been doing this and not being super critical of any of us in particular, but we let the federal government do stuff. We let the police department do stuff. We let lots of politicians, elected or bureaucratic or whatever, do things because we don't, we all know why. It's complicated. It's not one thing, but fear of getting involved, fear of repercussion, or just because we're good citizens and we want to let them do their job. That's the main reason. But there's these other things that come into play. We've got to stop doing that. We don't want to stop treating people respectfully and nicely. I'm not saying that. But we've got to hold people accountable. That is the big problem in our country. It's not so much them, whoever them are, the rhino Republicans, the crooked whoever's, the ones that are obvious. It's the people that are letting them get away with it, including whoever you think the good guys are, and I do. A lot of them are letting them get away with it up there. They're not doing their job because I've come strongly to believe this. The money's just too good. They don't want to let it go. And it's not just the money you're getting paid, it's the opportunity that you have to do other things. I saw a program, somebody was talking about Chris Ray, as he's gotten a lot of heat over the last few months, and some podcast or something, they were talking about, well, why would he take that job? Because he'd been with a law firm where he was making like some ungodly amount of lottery money every year, like $9 million a year or something. to become FBI. They were just making the additional point, why would you do that and give up that kind of money? Well, why would you? You know, you're gonna be putting your value, you're gonna take your value up a lot more if you become FBI agent. The money's not a problem. They've already got money. He's already got money in that case.
Don't you think it's because they're black, they've been blackmailed? They can't.
That's what a lot of people think, and I believe that's probably no doubt true in a lot of it, but nobody's gonna change it except us. Ever since I was a young man and started getting in politics, I've said it, we've all said it, or many of us have. We're gonna clean house. We don't care who it is. Get them all out, send them a message and start over. That would give a message, I promise you, because I could tell you a lot of good stories. I'll stop talking for a second. A lot of good stories, internal stories of us elected people that get scared when the people do stuff, you know, vote somebody out. Good story up in Tulsa and Kansas when I got to know some people up there and spoke, talking to them one time, and they were saying, yeah, we're such a small band up here, Republicans, so it was. We're such a small band up here, we can't really do much, so we came up with a different tactic. We decided to pick out four senators that were rhino kind of senators. And we just started picketing and doing other things like that in their offices. It was a relatively small group, but we just kept just driving them crazy. He said we defeated one of the four, and the rest of the Senate was all abuzz about, you see what those people did? They went out and got that guy, and I don't want them to get me. You know, they start thinking about that. And I've seen that in the Oklahoma legislature many times. When OPAC or some group will get active, they'll do something, they'll knock somebody out, and the others start paying attention. You know, like the OPAC, the Oklahoma Constitution newspaper, and their thing they do every year. Everybody's watching that. They want to get a good score on there as much as they can. So you've got some people, you're going to get some people that are, you know, they're trying to please two sides. They're trying to look good to the outside world, but they're also pleasing some other people internally, or that are getting lots of money in there. I'm going to give myself one plug. One other issue that I fought ever since I was in the legislature, I was in there twice, 12 years from 86 to 98. And then they beat me in 98. They came after me in 96 and then 98. And that's a good story in and of itself right there. But I came again and I ran again in 2006 just because I wanted to. Somebody asked me to, because they didn't like a candidate that was running. They said, we don't want any more rhinos. We need somebody who's going to be conservative. That was the only reason I ran again in 06, and I went till 12. But I've seen so many different internal examples of corruption. And one of the things that struck me when I was a young man early on is here I am, 30 years old, I get elected. Every district has about, 30 to whatever it is now, 38,000 people in every House district. So we send 101 people up to the state capitol to represent us, and they're supposed to get organized and do the things they do. It's been going on for hundreds of years, right? It's things like this. And decades here and around our country. And so I author a bill or several bills, and this is when the Democrats were in charge. It was actually flip-flop back then. About 70-something Democrats, the rest of us Republicans, 70-30, something like that. And then the chairman of a committee that your bill gets assigned to just says, you know, you might go to him and say, hey, are you gonna put my bill on your committee? Or I'd like to have my bill heard or something. Or are you gonna hear it? And they go, no, I'm not gonna hear it. Why not? Don't want to, or got a problem with it, or some people don't like it. Or equally, which happens frequently, is they'll say something like, yeah, let me see if I can get it on there next week. We got a really busy year schedule this year. We got X number of bills, and I don't know how we're gonna hear them all in just the 3 meetings we have, or 4, or whatever it is. Blah, you know where this is going. Blah, blah, blah. And then they finally say, John, I'm really sorry, I can't do it. And if you push it real hard, then you might start bucking up, and they'll act like they're mad, and maybe they don't like you now, and you're gonna have more trouble in the future getting stuff done. Then there's a rule that says, I'll just bring this up to go back to this point. There's a rule that says if you're trying to get a bill out of committee just to get a hearing, it's called the discharge petition. Some of you probably have heard of it. Let's say this whole group right here represents the committee of X. So there's whatever there is, 3, 6, 9, 12 or so people here. And so the discharge rule says I've got to get, I think it's 75% of that committee to sign this little petition that says we want Key's bill to be heard in the committee, or sometimes you can discharge at the floor, it doesn't matter. It's a game that's played. Why in the first place would anybody have the right to say no to the person you send up there to represent you? They're saying it to you. They're telling you you're not gonna have a voice. You're not gonna be able to redress your government. I mean, it just blows my mind the more I saw that. Well, the Democrats were in charge at the time, and I thought, well, it's easy to kind of blame it on them, we would never do that, right? So time went by, and I started fighting it. I started questioning them, pushing it, and they just had a good time with it. And we all kind of laughed about it from time to time. I started filing bills. I had to learn how to do this. Well, how do you change the rules? Anyway, I'll get into a longer story, but it's wrong for someone to deny another duly elected member of the House or Senate the right to have their bill heard. They were sent there by those people, and we got to change that. Here's what you're going to find out. I meant to. The only other mistake I made is there's a little booklet I made called Stolen Government. If you guys will invite me back sometime in the future, I'd like to talk about this. It's about a 25-page booklet, and it talks just about this and the shenanigans and how it goes on behind the scenes. And I'm rewriting it and making it more of a national kind of perspective on what other states do and what the Fed does, and how money is in behind it. Not exposing the money, there's enough been written about that already, we already know. But just adding the fact that it's just money behind it. When you think about the speaker, the floor leader, the chairman, let's say the chairman of not every committee, but some of the committees like energy, it's the biggest deal in Oklahoma, right? Lots of money represented in that committee, and they give it away to people that do things that they want them to do. And you can just go down the list, judiciary, agriculture, a few others. So there's a lot of power in there, and they give money to the chairman, the vice chair, and the other members that are demonstrating that they're not against them, they're going to be for them, we're going to listen to them. And that's where this is coming from. A Speaker of the House, a pro tem, any other member for that matter, can have more than just the committee they have to run their campaign. I could go start another committee called, Liberty Committee. Another committee that's called some name that they like to make names of stuff that sound like it's, came from God. And then get money in that one. And then you can, those committees can then give the same amount of money that an individual can give, but you just got multiples of it, which is $5,000, by the way, usually. So if you create several PACs like that, raise money, then I can give money, if I'm the chairman of that committee, or I'm the Speaker of the House, then I can give money to Glenn from multiple. I can give him more than just maybe 5,000. That's a big deal for most people that are in office. How do you feel about 20? Right? So it's hard for people to say no to ones that have that kind of cachet that they can share with others. Good old boy system. And the only way I know how to stop that is to guarantee, this is a longer story, I'll come back. You gotta take away the ability of them to do that. There are states where they have rules that guarantee a bill has to be heard if the author wants to have it heard, or variations on it. And so what I finally honed down my proposal after arguing this for 20 years with legislators down there is we need to have a rule, or I think it ought to be a law that says no one can deny an elected member of the legislature the right to have a bill heard, at least one bill, if they request it. And if it passes committee, then they cannot deny it to go to the floor to get a final hearing if the author wants it to be heard. The point really isn't that we've got to hear every bill, and that's what they like to come back and say. They like to come back and say, well, we can't hear every bill, there's all these, and then we'll all lose our minds and go crazy or something. It's not about hearing every bill. It's about who's pulling the strings back behind the scenes, and, well, Joe's got that bill, and that's going to be so-and-so, we don't like it, so don't hear that bill. That's what's going on. And the money's flowing to this guy over here. So anyway, I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you very much. I apologize, we had a couple of glitches, but would love to come back sometime and talk to you. Thank you.
One last comment about the raffle.
Oh, no, I was just gonna get him signed out of my,
Okay,
I
well,
was gonna sign him out of my account.
yeah, remember the raffle, there's a thing, for the, Republican fundraiser, so check that out. See Nathan or Joe to get your raffle tickets. And, if you wanna see Terry, he'll be live tomorrow at 1:45, I think our time. Information's, on the, OK2A, phone app. And he just sent me a text reminding me of that. So, thanks for coming out today. Any last thoughts, questions?
I was gonna mention something.
Okay.
So he was talking about, Merrick Garland earlier. So I don't know how many of you guys know this, but the FBI sniper that shot Randy Weaver's wife in the face was the same team leader that was sitting out the backside of Waco that was shooting people coming out of the building. And whenever Randy Weaver's family filed a lawsuit against, or filed a wrongful death suit against that FBI agent, do you know who defended him?
Lawn Warrior.
Bill Barr.
Bill.
Wow. Bill Barr was the guy that defended him in that wrongful death suit.
And we know the name of that guy, his name's been circulated.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. What's going on here?
I took it off.
Well, I was gonna sign out of my.
Oh, I thought you
my
did, I'm
office.
sorry.
No,
Here.
I was trying to
Is it
get
too
you.
late?
No, I was gonna sign out of my office.
Okay, thanks
I
for
know,
coming
I
today.
thought you already had, that's why I did.
No.
You want your back one?
Yeah.
Correct it? Yeah.